Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Welcome to our live session today. Today we will be covering the verb tenses. So generally, we know that there are three basic forms of verb tenses: the present tense form, the past tense form, and the future tense form, right? But each of these tenses or each of these tense forms has subdivisions or subcategories. So we will look into those and we will try to learn as much as we can. However, I must inform you that I've tried to keep the entire lecture as brief as possible so you can understand easily. All right? Okay, so let's get going. Verb tenses. Now, verbs come in three tenses: past, present, and future. The past is used to describe things that have already happened. For example, earlier in the day, yesterday, last week, 3 years ago. The present tense is used to describe things that are happening right now or things that are continuous. The future tense describes things that have yet to happen. For example, later, tomorrow, next week, next year, 3 years from now. So what do we understand, or what are we getting from this particular slide here? Verbs come in three tenses: the past tense, the present tense, and the future tense. So the past tense, if you describe anything in the past tense, you would probably mean that the action that you're talking about clearly it took place in the past, right? Something which has already happened, right? Okay, maybe that incident or that action took place yesterday. So for example, if you say, I went to my office yesterday. So that action is clearly gone. That has already happened, and that clearly happened the day before, as you said, yesterday. So I went to the office yesterday. Now, the present tense is used to describe things that are happening right now, or things that are continuous, or things that happen every now and then, right? Such as, for example, if I say that I am discussing verb tenses. If I say right now that I am discussing verb tenses. So here, this sentence that I'm discussing verb tenses is in the present continuous tense. And it tells you exactly what I am doing. So I am discussing. So the words I'm discussing is the present continuous form of the verb discuss. So I am discussing verb tenses with you right now. So which tense have I employed here? The present continuous tense. Okay. Now there are some other incidents or actions that take place regularly, such as, for example, if I say, I teach English, or I teach the English language. So in this case, I'm not really telling you what I am doing right now, but something that I do generally. That's something that is my profession, something that is my practice, something I do generally, every now and then, or maybe in a regular fashion, in a regular manner, under set circumstances. Okay? All right. What about the future tense? The future tense describes things that are yet to happen, things that have not happened yet, and those things that you want to do or will happen in the future. Okay? So that future can be tomorrow, that future can be a few minutes later, that future can be hours later, that future can be years later, ages later, decades later, centuries later, anything that is in the future, not in the present, not in the past. So you could probably say that I want to go, or I will travel to the United States next year. If you say this, you mean that you will be traveling, or that you will travel to the United States next year, some action that you want to do or pursue in the future, not now, not in the past, but in the future. And to be exact, next year, as you have just said, or as we have just arranged this example. So I would like to go to the United States next year, or I will be traveling, or I will travel to the United States next year. So this sentence is in the future tense. To be exact, simple future tense, future simple tense. Okay. We've got some queries here and also some greetings. Salahuddin Rana says, Assalamu alaikum, sir. Wa alaikum assalam. Salahuddin Ninzamuni says, Assalamu alaikum, sir. How are you? Well, walaikum salam to you first, and second, yes, I'm fine. Alhamdulillah. Thank you so much for asking me. I hope you're fine as well. We have Tasnia Arabi saying, Assalamu alaikum, sir. Walaikum salam to you too, Tasnia. Now, I think here Ninja has a question. Bolt runs faster than any other. This sentence, why faster, is adverb, why not adjective, sir? Oh, well, you see, the word fast shares two common features. It can be considered an adverb. It may also be considered an adjective. Now, it depends how exactly are you using it. So, for example, if you say that Usain Bolt, follow this, the fastest runner in the world, right? As we know him. So Usain Bolt is fast. If you say this, Usain Bolt is fast. So here basically you're defining or you're talking about Usain Bolt's quality, right? So you say Bolt is fast, meaning, you're actually describing or talking about one of his qualities, and that is his fast. And he's fast in what? He's fast in running. But the same word can be used as an adverb as well, such as he wrote fast. He wrote fast. So maybe someone was writing something and he did the entire work quickly, right? In other words, instead of saying quickly, you may say fast. And in this case, the word fast would be an adverb. So he wrote fast. Now, the adverb version of fast also has its superlative and comparative forms. So if you want to make a comparison between two people who wrote fast, you could say that he wrote faster than she did. You see? He wrote faster than she did. A is fast and so is B. But B is faster than A. So in that case, you say B is faster than A. In this case, however, faster is not an adverb, but rather an adjective, but the comparative form of the adjective faster. Sorry, the comparative form of the adjective fast. So you're making a comparison between the two qualities, between the same qualities of two people. So A is a fast runner or is fast at running, so is B. But B is faster than A is. So you say B is faster than A is. In that case, or in this particular sentence, the adjective faster or the word faster is an adjective, and to be more specific, it is the comparative version of the adjective fast. Okay, so I hope it's clear. All right. Okay. Tasni Arabi says, how many parts of the quiz of 9 parts of speech are going to be in part 2? Thank you, sir. Well, I'm not really sure about any technical error that you might have faced. Well, yesterday I sent 2 tests to all of you who have registered, to all the people who registered. So yeah, so 2 tests, part 1 and part 2, both on the parts of speech that we finished discussing the day before yesterday. Okay. Okay. So up until now, what have we come to learn? We have come to learn that verb tenses or verbs come in 3 forms, or they come in 3 tenses: the past tense, the present tense, and the future tense. And we use the past tense of a verb to denote something that happened in the past. And we talk about actions that happen in the present. And when we do so, we say that we use the present tense to talk about actions that take place in the present, or in a continuous form, or maybe in a general manner. And then we use the future tense to talk about actions that we want to happen in the future, actions that we want to pursue in the future. Okay, moving forward to the next slide, we have some very important examples here. These examples should make our understanding clearer. Okay, so here, take a look at this. Now, each of these tenses, the present tense, the past tense, and the future tense, each of these tenses has 4 subcategories. 4 subcategories, such as for the present tense, we've got 4 categories of the present tense: the simple present tense, the present continuous tense, the present perfect tense, and the present perfect continuous tense. Okay, so we'll see and we will discuss which subcategory do we use under which circumstance? Simple present, or the simple present tense. I read nearly every day. I read nearly every day. Present continuous, or the present continuous tense. I am reading Shakespeare at the moment. I am reading Shakespeare at the moment. Present perfect, or the present perfect tense. I have read so many books, I can't keep count. The present perfect continuous tense. I have been reading since I was 6. I have been reading since I was 6. Okay, so here, as you can see, the very first category, or the very first subcategory, is the simple present tense. And when you say the simple present tense, as we have here in this example, I read nearly every day. So when you say this sentence, do you mean that you're reading right now? No, you are not reading right now. You mean that you do something on a regular basis. You do something on a regular basis. And how regular is that action of yours? You do that action every day. So you say, I read nearly every day. So this sentence is in the simple present tense, denoting an idea, or denoting or talking about an action that take place or that you pursue every day. So it's a general truth and something that you do every now and then in the present, under the present circumstances. You follow? So things that we do naturally or generally or all the time or always or after regular intervals, such actions may be expressed or may be talked about in the simple present tense. Like in here, I read nearly every day, or I take my car to my office, or the sun rises in the east and sets in the west. Man is mortal, or I love my family, or I am an English language trainer. So all these sentences are in the simple present tense. They talk about actions, or they talk about situations or states of verbs or stative verbs that take place or that are present, that are true every single day. General truths. To talk about general truths, we employ the simple present tense. Also to talk about regular actions that we pursue, we employ the simple present tense. Okay? I hope this is clear. Now moving on to the second subcategory, the present continuous tense. Now, I am reading Shakespeare at the moment. So when exactly do we employ the present continuous tense? We talk about action in the present continuous tense when that action is being pursued at the moment of speaking. That's the first scenario when we use the present continuous tense, such as here, I am reading Shakespeare at the moment. If I say to you that I'm reading Shakespeare at the moment, I mean that as I speak of it, I am doing this right now. Okay? Such as, for example, I am teaching English to you right now at this moment. So here I say, I am teaching. So this is the present continuous tense. Now I'm doing something. So since I'm doing something right now, and I have to talk about it, I'm employing the present continuous tense to talk about it. Okay? Also, many a time, we talk about a situation or an action that has been taking place for quite some time in the present, such as for example, you could say that I'm studying English. I'm studying English these days. Follow this. If you say that I am studying English these days, you mean you did not used to study English, but recently you have begun to study English, and that you are studying English these days, meaning nowadays, right? So you can say something, or you can talk of an action that has begun recently and is ongoing, but you did not used to do it in the past, but you have been doing so for some time now in the present. So you say, I am studying English these days. Okay, so here am studying is again a verb put in the present continuous tense. Okay, so I am studying English these days. Also, if you want to talk about an action that you're pursuing right now as you speak, or at the moment, you can also employ, or you have to employ the present continuous tense, and you say, I am reading Shakespeare at the moment. I am talking to my mother, or I'm talking to my wife right now. Something, such actions. Okay, so, and then you have the present perfect tense. I have read so many books I can't keep count. Follow this. I have read so many books I can't keep count. So when do we exactly talk about actions in the present perfect tense? We talk about actions or situations or states of verbs, and we keep them, or we employ the present perfect tense to talk about such actions when you have done something. You have done something. Follow what I say. You have done an action, or you have pursued an action. You're done with it, but the effect of it, right? The result of the situation or the result of your action is still persistent or is still ongoing. The effect is still here. The effect is present. The effect is not gone yet. You follow? I'll repeat this again for you. Such as, for example, you can see here, I've read so many books I can't keep count. So in this case, what do you exactly mean? You mean that you read books, of course, and you have read many books. Now, you are not reading books at the moment. You may not be reading books for quite some time now, but naturally, you do read books, and you read books in the past. But when you employ the present perfect tense, you mean that you have read books, and the effect of reading books is still here. The result of reading so many books is still here. So you say, I have read so many books, I can't keep count. Also, a very important note in this case. Sometimes we have this confusion whether to talk of something in the simple past tense or to talk about it in the present perfect tense, such as, I'm going to say two sentences to you. Let me see if you can differentiate the two, or if you can find out the differences between the two sentences. If you can, however, do answer in the comment section, okay? I had breakfast in the morning. I had breakfast in the morning. I have had breakfast in the morning. Follow this. The first sentence is, I had breakfast in the morning. And the second sentence is, I have had breakfast in the morning. Now, can you tell me which one is right and which one is wrong? Or if both are right, or if both are wrong, or if there are any differences between the two sentences? I'm going to give you about 30 seconds to answer to comment or to post your answer in the comment section. Okay, so when you say I had breakfast in the morning, you mean that the morning, the time that you're talking about is gone. It's no more morning. Maybe it's afternoon. Maybe it's evening. But you say I had breakfast in the morning. I had breakfast in the morning, right? So I had breakfast in the morning. When you say this sentence is in the simple past tense, right? So I had breakfast in the morning, meaning that you had something and that having is gone. It's done. It's a clear action of the past. And the timing of the action is also gone. It's no more here. So maybe in the afternoon, you say to someone that I had breakfast in the morning. But when it is still morning, when it is still not, maybe say, for example, let's just say it's 9 o'clock in the morning and you had breakfast at 8 o'clock, right? So you don't want to mention the time as in the clock time, right? You only want to mention, say, for example, which part of the day is it? So you say, I have had breakfast in the morning. When do you do so? When it is still morning. You haven't really gone by and the morning is not over yet. You see, the morning is not over yet. So you say, I have had breakfast in the morning. Maybe you had you had breakfast 30 minutes ago, and it is still morning. It's not afternoon. It's not evening. It's not night. You're still in that morning, and you had breakfast just a little while ago. So you say, I have had breakfast in the morning. But if you were to say so, maybe in the afternoon to a friend of yours, at that time, you would say, I had breakfast in the morning, not have had, because morning is gone by then. You're no more in the morning. You're in the afternoon now. So you cannot say, I have had breakfast in the morning. You have to say, I had breakfast in the morning. So an action of the past, an action that took place in a time that is completely past right now as you speak of it. But if the timing of the action is not over yet, or if the time of the day is not over yet when you probably pursued an action, in such a case, you could possibly say, or you could possibly use the present perfect tense and say, I have had breakfast in the morning. So actions that have been recently finished, right? Such as, for example, right now it's evening, right? Right now it's evening. So I could say that I have started the live session. Follow this. I have started the live session. I have started the live session. Well, I could say I started the live session as well, could I not? I could, but why am I not choosing to say so? Because the effect of my action is still ongoing. It's still present because I'm still very much in the session, and I'm not pinpointing the exact time when I began the session. If you ask me when exactly did you start the session, at that time maybe if you did ask me so, I would then probably say I started, not have started. I started my session at 8:30 or 7:30. Sorry, at 7:30. I started my session at 7:30. But if you ask me, have you started your session? Then I would say yes, I have started my session. Note, when you talk about something in the past tense, you come up with the exact time of it if possible. But when you talk about something in the present perfect tense, you don't mention the exact time. Okay, you don't mention the exact time, but you only talk of the action, such as I have read a lot of books. Follow this. I have read a lot of books. This implies that you read books and that you read books in the past, or maybe maybe you read books still now, right? There is no way to actually understand that this action is completely of the past. But however, if you want to mention specifically that you used to read books and that you don't read books anymore, then you better come up with the time, or you better come up with a time expression that definitely expresses that your reading does not take place anymore. It used to take place in the past and it doesn't take place anymore. So just for example, I read 50 books last year. Follow this. I read 50 books, or I read so many books last year. So the expression last year clearly tells you that the action is of the past and it has nothing to do with the present. But if you say, I have read so many books, and you don't say, you don't come up with any time expression, it means the effect of your reading books is still here. It's ongoing. You may read books even now. So you say, I have read so many books. Do you follow? So that's the difference between the present perfect tense and the simple past tense. So when do we exactly use the present perfect tense? When we want to talk about actions that have recently been finished, or actions that whose effect is still present, or actions that you don't want to talk of the things that have just recently been finished, or something or an action whose effect is still here. The effect of which is still here, is still ongoing. Okay? All right. Now, the present perfect continuous tense, the same. Only in this case, you talk of the action in the continuous form, such as, I have been reading since I was 6. Now, follow this. I have been reading since I was 6. So there is some specification to the use of this, to the present perfect continuous tense. So you want to talk of something that you have been doing for quite some time now, and you want to mention that you have been doing it for some time, or since a time in the past. Okay, so you say, I have been reading since I was 6, meaning you started reading when you were 6 years old, and however old you may be now, you are still reading, or you have still continued to read. You haven't finished reading, or you haven't stopped reading yet. So you read books regularly. And when did you exactly start reading books? When you were 6 years old. So you say, I have been reading since I was 6. I have been reading since I was 6, meaning you began reading when you were 6 years old, and you haven't stopped until now. You're still reading. You still read books at regular intervals, or on a regular basis. You follow? So just for example, I could say that I have been teaching English for the last 11 years. Note what I'm saying here. I have been teaching English for the last 11 years. Does this tell you that I've stopped teaching English? Of course not. It doesn't. It rather tells you for how long I have been doing this. It tells you for how long I have been teaching English. So I have been teaching English for the last 11 years. And yes, those 11 years may have gone, but I may be in my 12th year right now. But the effect of this entire action is still present as I say I have been doing, meaning I'm still doing it. It's still in the present. Okay? Or in other words, I could say that I have been teaching English since 2009. I have been teaching English professionally since 2009. So here in this sentence, note that there is a mention or there is a time expression, right? But this time expression talks about the time in the past when I began pursuing a course of action, and I'm still doing it. I haven't stopped that particular action of mine. So I tell you that I have been teaching English professionally since 2009. You follow? That is exactly when you use the present perfect continuous tense when you want to talk about actions that have been ongoing, actions that have been ongoing, and actions that you may have started in the past, but you haven't stopped yet. You're still pursuing that action. Okay, so I have been reading since I was 6 years old. I have been teaching English professionally since 2009, or I have been studying in this college for the last 4 years, or I have been driving for the last 5 years, or I have been married for the last 8 years. Whichever action or state of verb or situation you want to talk about, you can do so in the present perfect continuous tense as long as that action is still present, as long as that action is still ongoing. You follow? Okay. All right. I hope it's clear. If not, do please mention your post your confusion or post your query in the comment section. I will try my best to get back to you. We have a question here from Mir Raihanuddin asking, by the time she arrives, we will have finished our homework. What is wrong with we will finish? A very good question. I will answer your question when we discuss the future tense forms. Okay. Moving forward, now we have the past tense forms. Okay. The following illustrates the proper use of verb tenses. The simple past tense or simple past. Last night, I read an entire novel. Note and follow that when we were discussing the differences between the present perfect and the present perfect tense and simple past tense, I told you that when you want to talk about, or when you talk about an action that took place in the past, you come up with a time expression denoting that action, denoting that the action that you're talking about clearly took place in the past and has nothing to do with the present grammatically, right? Similarly, here you can see that there is a time expression clearly telling you that the action took place in the past and has nothing to do with the present grammatically, such as last night. You're not talking about now. You're talking about last night, and last night is well gone. It's no more here. So last night, I read an entire novel. Last night, I read an entire novel. Okay. Similarly, what about the past continuous tense? Excuse me. Yeah. So what about the past continuous tense? So we employ the past continuous tense when we want to talk about actions that, again, took place in the past. Only this time, you talk about them in a continuous manner, or not a manner, but in the continuous tense. such as I was reading Shakespeare last night. You could possibly say that I read Shakespeare last night, but that would do. But you may also choose to say that I was reading Shakespeare last night. However, also note, we employ the past continuous tense to talk of an action when we want to say more, such as, for example, maybe something else happened when you were reading Shakespeare last night, right? Such as for such situations, for such instances, you could say that I was reading Shakespeare last night when someone called me. Follow this. If you only wanted to talk about reading Shakespeare, you could just say, I read Shakespeare last night. That would do. That would be fine. But not only were you reading Shakespeare last night, but something else happened when you were reading Shakespeare. So you switch to the past continuous tense and you say that I was reading Shakespeare last night when I received a phone call, or when a fire broke out, may Allah forbid, or when something good or bad may have happened, right? So I was reading Shakespeare last night. You employ the past continuous tense when you want to talk about two actions that took place in the past, two simultaneous actions or two actions that collided in the past. Okay, that's how I understand it, and that's how I speak in the past continuous tense when I have to. Okay, we have a query here from Kondogar Arafat asking, I have lived here for 5 years. I have been living here for 5 years. One is present perfect and the other is present perfect continuous tense. Are the both sentences don't the both sentences indicate the same meaning? Yes, of course. When you say I have lived here for 5 years, yes, it means you're still living here, and you have lived here for 5 years, meaning you started living here 5 years ago and you have been living here ever since. The other way of saying or putting this is I have been living here for 5 years clearly tells you that you're still living here and that you started living here 5 years ago. However, follow this. If you choose to stick to the first part, or if you choose to go with the first option, which is I have lived here for 5 years, this sentence is in the present perfect tense, right? And when you say this, that I have lived here for 5 years, you keep a door open for people to understand that maybe you are done living here. Maybe you're done living here. Maybe you are not living here any longer, but you have lived here for 5 years. So this is the 5th year of your life, right? This is the 5th year of your living, sorry, not your life. This is the 5th year of your living in the house. And in the 5th year, you have decided to shift your to change your residence or to move into a new house, right? So you say, I've lived here for 5 years, but now I want to go to another location. Follow this. Or now I have decided to change my address, or now I'm moving to another location, right? When you say I have lived here for 5 years, although it doesn't necessarily mean that you have stopped living here. It does mean that you're still living here, but it may also mean that you're done living here and maybe you're looking forward to moving out of this house. But on the other hand, if you go with the second option where you say, I have been living here for 5 years, it clearly means that you're still living here and you are not done living here. You follow? Am I clear? I hope I am. Okay. But yes, to answer your query directly, if both the sentences mean the same, yes, they do mean the same. They both mean that you live in this place and that you have been living here for the last 5 years. You started living in this location or in this area or in this house 5 years ago, and ever since you have been living here. Okay? All right. So now, past continuous tenses as we were discussing. So we talk about something in the past continuous tense when we want to talk about two things that have happened simultaneously in the past. There are two things that happened simultaneously in the past, such as you called me last night when I was reading Shakespeare. You see? You called me last night when I was reading Shakespeare. So when you did something, I, on the other hand, was doing something. So while I was doing something, something else happened. You follow? So one of the actions is expressed in the simple past tense, and the other action that may have taken place for a longer duration is expressed in the past continuous tense. So Getting a phone call is definitely a shorter action, but reading a book is definitely a longer action, right? So you say that I was reading Shakespeare last night when you called me. So this part, you called me, is in the simple past tense, whereas the longer action is expressed in the past continuous tense. Okay? All right, I hope we are clear. And then we have the past perfect tense. So when we talk about when do we employ the past perfect tense? When do we use it? Let's read the example here. I had read at least 100 books by the time I was 6. Now, very important and quite tricky as well, because this tricks me often. I mean to say that I'm tricked by the past perfect tense, or I get confused at times thinking whether I should be employing the past perfect tense in this case or not. So let's try to increase our attention to this particular category. So the past perfect tense. I had read at least 100 books by the time I was 6. So what is the general rule for using the past perfect tense? The general rule is you want to talk about, again, 2 actions. You want to talk about 2 actions, but now these actions are not or were not simultaneous actions. You know what simultaneous means? Things that take place together at one go, side by side. So these actions that we are now talking about happened, and these actions took place in the past, but they did not take place. They did not take place simultaneously, meaning they did not take place at the same time. One action took place first, and then the other followed, and then the other action followed. You follow? First, one action took place, and then another action followed. So we have consequent actions, consequent or subsequent actions, not simultaneous, but subsequent actions. Action 1, then came action 2. Now, both these actions are connected. Both these actions are connected, which is why we're going to have to use the past perfect tense here. So take a look at this sentence. I had read at least 100 books by the time I was 6. So the first part of the sentence is in the past perfect tense. When you say something, when you use the verb had as the as the helping verb followed by the main verb, you are basically arranging, or you're basically designing a sentence in the past perfect tense. So I had read at least 100 books by the time I was 6. So I was 6, and when I became 6 years old, that's one event, right? But another event or a chain of events took place before I turned 6. So now I want to talk about both these events or both these actions at one go. So I want to say that by the time I became 6, by the time I was 6 years old, I had finished reading hundreds of books. Does it help? By the time I was 6 years old, I had finished reading 100 books. So my reading 100 books took place before I became 6 years old. You follow? My reading 100 books took place before I turned 6. So I want to talk about both these actions at one go. What do I say? By the time I was 6 years old, I had finished reading 100 books. Or I had read at least 100 books by the time I was 6. Now, let's bring in some more examples where we have the past perfect tense, such as the patient had died. The patient had died by the time the ambulance arrived. Follow this. The patient had died by the time the ambulance arrived. Now, both these actions took place in the past, but the patient dying took place before the ambulance arrived. The ambulance arrived after the patient had died. You follow? So to talk of the action that took place before the following action, we use the past perfect tense. And to talk of the event that took place later, we use the simple past tense. So the patient had died before the ambulance arrived. Or by the time the ambulance arrived, the patient had already died. A very tragic thing to say. A tragic example, actually. So by the time the ambulance arrived, the patient had died. Or By the time I turned 15, I had already become famous. By the time I turned 15, I had already become famous. So you became famous first, and then you became 15 years old, right? So maybe you became famous when you were 14 years old. And on your 15th birthday, you turned 15. And now maybe you're 17 years old and you're recollecting your memories and you say, well, I had become famous before I turned 15. I had become famous before I turned 15, you see? So two things taking place here, two actions took place. The first action being you becoming famous, the second action, you turning 15. So you talk of the first action in the past perfect tense, and you talk of the latter action or the following action in the simple past tense. I hope we are clear. Now, what of the past perfect continuous tense? Again, similar definition, only this time the former action is spoken of in the continuous form, such as, I had been reading for a year before my younger sister learned to read. Follow this. I had been reading, not have been, but had been. I had been reading for a year before my younger sister learned to read. So, what are you doing here? Again, two actions. You learned to read and you read, and then your sister learned to read, right? Your younger sister learned to read. So, by the time your younger sister learned to read, you had been reading already. You follow? So, I had been reading for a year. Meaning again, in simpler words, you finish reading, or you had been reading for a year, and then after that year, maybe in the next year, in the following year, your sister learned to read. So you say, I had been reading for a year before my younger sister learned to read. Also, let's take another example. The patient had been consulting Dr. Fuller or Dr. Smith. Let's go with Dr. Smith. The patient had been, not have been, not has been. The patient had been consulting Dr. Fuller before he was asked to consult Dr. X or Dr. Strange. Let me go again. The patient had been consulting Dr. Fuller before he decided to consult, or before he no, let me rearrange it for you. The patient had been consulting Dr. X before he was asked to consult Dr. Y. Okay, so the patient was asked to consult Dr. Y, but before the patient was asked to consult Dr. Y, he had been already consulting with someone else. Who had he been consulting with? He had been consulting with Dr. X. And then after maybe he was finished consulting Dr. X, or when he was consulting Dr. X, someone else advised him to consult Dr. Y and to not consult any longer with Dr. X. So you say the patient had been consulting Dr. X before he was asked to consult Dr. Y. Okay? These may appear a bit confusing, but if you practice enough, of course, all these tense forms will get into your system. So as I say all the time, to learn English better, what we have to do is we need to increase our exposure to the language to the maximum extent possible. The more you speak, the more you talk, the more you read, the more time you give to English, the better you get at it. Okay? All right. Now we're done with the past tense forms. So we've discussed the simple past tense, we discussed the simple past tense, we discussed the past continuous tense, we discussed the past perfect tense, and we discussed the past perfect continuous tense. Okay, there's a remark from Ms. Baldwin Hamadas saying, the standard of the questions of the previous quiz was very good. Thank you, sir, for refurnishing my grammar skill. Okay, you're most welcome. I'm glad to know that you're being helped. Alhamdulillah, that's where that's where I come to feel good, when I see that, all of you Right. Now we have the future tenses. The following illustrates the proper use of verb tenses. The simple future tense, I will read as much as I can this year. The future continuous tense, I will be reading Julius Caesar soon. The future perfect tense, I will have read 100 books by the end of this year. And the future perfect continuous tense, I will have been reading for 2 hours at least before dinner time. Let's pay attention to these subcategories. The first subcategory here, the simple future tense. So when do we talk of actions in the simple future tense? We talk about an action in the simple future tense when we want to do that action or when we want to pursue that action in the future. And you must come up with a clear future time expression in this case, right? A clear future time expression. So you say, I will read as much as I can this year. Now, this year, when you say this year, you're not talking about now, but maybe in the year that you are in, but the year is not over yet, and you have much of the year left, right? So let's just say it's the beginning of 2020, or let's just say it's the beginning of 2021, and you still have got 11 months left. And then you decide and you say to a friend of yours that I will read as many books as possible this year. So here, this expression of yours is in the simple future tense. You're talking about something that you will do. So how is the simple future tense formed? It's formed with the help of the modal verb will or shall, immediately followed by the base form of the main verb, such as, for example, I will go, I will read, I will talk, I will meet, right? So I will do this, or I will do that, or I will read as much as possible this year, or I will travel to the United States next year, or I will finish, wait. Let's just say that I will travel to the United States in 2022. So here again, you have a clear future time expression. So you want to travel to the United States in which year? In 2022. So you say, I will travel to the United States in 2022. You see, so that's how you construct a sentence in the simple future tense. Okay, what about the future continuous tense? Here, you talk of something again, and only this time, you are keeping or you're talking the action that you want to do or that you want to pursue in the future in the continuous tense. So you say, I will be reading Julius Caesar soon. Also, the word soon is again another future time expression, or an expression that denotes, or a time expression that denotes a time of the future. So you say, I will be reading Julius Caesar soon. Julius Caesar is, of course, a book by William Shakespeare, and it's, of course, based on the life of the real Julius Caesar. Okay, so I will be reading Julius Caesar soon. You see, so you could say I will read Julius Caesar soon. That would do as well. But at times we can somehow talk of actions that we want to pursue in the future, and we can talk of them in the future continuous tense. So I could say that I will read Julius Caesar soon. I can also say I will be reading Julius Caesar soon. Both are fine. Will read, will be reading, both are fine. Okay. Now, future perfect tense. We had a question from Miraihan who've been asking, by the time she arrives, we will have finished. All right, so this question will be answered now. The future perfect tense, I will have read 100 books by the end of this year. Follow this. I will have read 100 books by the end of this year. When do we exactly use the future perfect tense? Can you say? We want to talk about actions in the future perfect tense when we want to talk of an action that we expect to be finished, that we expect to be done and dusted with by a certain time in the future. By a certain time in the future, such as, take a look at this example here. I will have read 100 books by the end of this year. Now, the end of this year is a certain time period, right? It could be November. It could be not really November. When you say the end of the year, you possibly mean December, right? You possibly mean December. So by December, you expect something to happen. You expect an action to be complete. So you say, I will have read 100 books by the end of this year. Okay. Yeah. So as Raihanuddin Ahmed, or not Ahmed, Raihanuddin was asking, what's wrong with we will finish? Well, we don't really go with we will finish when we want an action to be complete within a certain period in the future. We only employ the simple future tense when we want something to happen and not be complete, but rather something to happen in the future. But when we expect something to be complete within a time period in the future, we go with the future perfect tense, such as in this example. I will have read 100 books by the end of this year. Or you can say I will have graduated from university by next year, or by fall of next year, by autumn of next year. Okay? Or I will have completed 3 years of service at my organization, or I will have been working for him or her, or I will have worked 3 years, or I will have been married for 5 years by next year. So when you reach next year, you mean that you will complete 5 years of your marriage. So I will have been married for 5 years next year. You follow? Okay. So we employ the future perfect tense when we want to talk about actions that we want to see complete within a time period, within a future time, within a certain future time. Okay? Now, moving on to future perfect continuous tense. I will have been reading for 2 hours at least before dinner time. Again, the definition is similar to the definition of future perfect tense, right? So only in this case, you're talking with the action in the continuous tense. So I will have been reading. Instead of saying I will have read, you say I will have been reading for 2 hours at least before dinner time, right? Or I will have been studying in this college. I will have been studying in this college for 4 years by next year. So this year it's 2020, next year is 2021, and you say when you will reach 2021, or when you will be in 2021, you will have finished, or you will have been studying, because studying is a continuous work. Only this time this work is not complete, right? So you say I will have been studying in this college for 4 years by next year. In the first in the future perfect tense, you expect the action to be complete by a certain future time. But in the future perfect continuous tense, you don't really mean that you will be complete, but rather you will be continuing to do that action in a future, or at a future time, or by a certain future time, such as I will have been reading for 2 hours at least before dinner time. So before dinner time is here, or right before dinner time, or right until dinner time, you will have been reading books, and maybe you will have been doing so for 2 hours. Maybe dinner time is at 9, but maybe you will start reading at 7, and you will have been reading for 2 hours before dinner time, or until dinner time, or by the time dinner is ready. Okay? Am I making enough sense? I hope I am. If not, please do let me know in the comment section, and I will try to answer your queries. So this is pretty much it from verb tenses. They may be a little tricky, and they are tricky, of course. They do trick me, they trick a lot of English experts, but they're not unconquerable. They're definitely conquerable, and people do conquer tenses. And once you learn to employ tenses properly, they will not really bother you much. So how can we exactly do so? We need to know the rules, of course, as we have tried to learn some of this and some of that today. But practice makes man perfect. So the more we practice these tenses, the more we employ the use of these tenses in our regular speech, the better we are expected to get at these. Okay? So I hope you have learned something at least from today's session, and I hope all of you will be practicing these tenses, or will be looking more into these tenses, inshallah. And when you speak in English the next time, you will be careful about your use of tenses. Okay? I hope to see you again all tomorrow, inshallah. to see you all again tomorrow, inshallah. And tomorrow, hopefully, we will be discussing conditionals, another interesting chapter from English grammar. So until then, everyone, please take good care of yourselves and stay well. Keep me in your dua. Thank you once again. Assalamu alaikum.